Talking about California's Governor Gavin Newsom, who we just heard from just a moment ago. I mean, he acknowledged there is a fairness element to all of this. Your thoughts about just his acknowledgement that it's unfair?
It was amazing to me. Number one, this is the first time I've heard really any elected Democrat, especially in the governorship position, be asked so directly this question: do you agree with men and women's sports? He not only says it's unfair, he says it's deeply unfair, and then goes on to say it's easy to call out, which is
something just cracked wide open in California. And no, it's not another power outage. Gavin Newsom's carefully polished image just took a direct hit, thanks to Riley Gaines, who didn't just call him out but exposed a level of entitlement that will make you question how he still keeps a straight face. What happened is wild, and this clash is already getting everyone talking.
Because if it's easy to call out, then why in the world haven't you called it out? Of course, California is rampant with this issue. Not only the issue of allowing men into women's sports, but allowing men into women's prisons. I mean, of course, the list goes on. So to see this is amazing, number one. But of course, he doesn't think it's unfair enough to actually do something about it. Gavin Newsom, really all of the Democratic Party, at least in terms of elected representation, have just become phenomenal at sitting on the fence, kind of winking at both sides. And that's what Gavin Newsom was doing there. He says, look, yes, it's unfair, but I don't want to be perceived as mean or anything other than inclusive and kind and tolerant. So therefore,
please subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. Gavin Newsom struts around like the lead actor in a political rom-com, California's Prince Charming, with hair so perfect it probably has its own state tax bracket, flashing smiles and leaning on the podium as if applause were guaranteed by law. The problem is, he's been so wrapped up in his own Golden Boy performance that he forgot the most important thing. People are actually paying attention.
Newsom is clearly angling at a 2028 presidential run. In an interview with Charlie Kirk, he has come out now and said that he acknowledges it is unfair to allow men onto women's sports teams, but not unfair enough for him to actually do something about it. He's really become this legendary fence sitter, continuing to wink at both sides. But we see you, Gavin.
No one's paying more attention than Riley Gaines, who isn't the type to be starstruck by a politician who looks like he moonlights in shampoo commercials. She's been grinding in the pool for Olympic leave hours, fighting for fairness in women's sports, while Newsom has been busy signing bills that might sound good on paper but flop in reality like a bad net.
I'm frustrated that we have to be here, that we as women have to stand before you all on national television demanding equal opportunities, demanding privacy in areas of undressing, demanding safety in our sports. Amazing to me that we are still here fighting this fight, that the Democratic Party has really doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on their ridiculous stance. But that
when Riley saw the King of California entitlement flexing again, she did what everyone had been secretly waiting for. She lit him up. The irony is thicker than one of Newsom's hair gels, a man who's built his entire brand on preaching equality, fairness, and progress, all while sipping fine wine on taxpayer-funded vacations.
After you swam against Leah Thomas now, 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, that we are still in a position where, if anything, Democrats have hardened their stance on this being okay?
You know what, Clay? I truthfully imagined, I knew this, of course, would be an election issue. It would get us through November of 2024, but I really believed that, of course, we would see this red wave, which we saw, and I believed after that the Democrats would slowly begin to recant, to distance themselves from their voting records, from their positions they've taken on totally outlandish, crazy stuff such as men and women's sports. But that is not at all what they have done. They have doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on this insanity. Now, I love how Trump words it. He is so plain in his language, of course, which is another reason why I think specifically young people love him, are drawn to him. He's so authentic. He says, as a male, he was less than an average competitor. And that's so true. That is virtually the case in every scenario, every situation, every circumstance where we see this happening. We don't see it going the other way. It is virtually always
the same guy who lectures everyone about sacrifice while dining at restaurants that could cover 6 months of your rent. And Riley Gaines wasn't about to let that slide. Newsom carries an aura of entitlement that clings like designer cologne. He doesn't even have to speak, his every move screams, "I was born into a world where the valet parks my problems for me." He's the politician version of that high school kid who never studied but still got A's because his parents donated a library wing. Riley saw through that polished act like chlorine cuts through cheap goggles. having faced real pressure, competition, and actually earned her place. She slammed the whistle on Newsom's do as I say, not as I do routine, blowing the foul and dragging him straight into the shallow end. And it's not just personality under his reign. California has become a paradox. A land of sunshine, beaches, and Silicon Valley dreams wrapped around homelessness crises, crime spikes, and families leaving faster than Hollywood stars sell their LA mansions. Yet somehow, Newsom smiles through it all as if everything is fine, like a weatherman standing in a hurricane, insisting
of progress, indicating we are moving in the positive forward direction. No, what Governor Mills is doing, and again, Democratic governors across the nation, is deeply regressive and utterly misogynistic.
And Riley hit it where it hurts. Newsom didn't just stumble into politics, he fell into privilege. With Getty family connections and a billionaire dynasty practically on speed dial, hardly the humble beginnings politicians love to recycle. Riley pointed out, unapologetically, that this man talks about equality while practically being born with a silver surfboard. Growing up surrounded by billionaires turns fairness into a slogan, not a lifestyle. Then there's his performance politics, a master of the photo op. He flashes rolled up sleeves, pretending to tackle problems festering for decades, only to jet off to the next perfectly curated appearance once the cameras are off. Riley Gaines wasn't impressed. She's seen real hard work, and it doesn't involve rehearsed speeches or press conferences staged like Hollywood premieres. The contrast is almost comical. Here's Riley, a swimmer who trained until her arms nearly fell off, going toe-to-toe with a man whose greatest endurance test might be standing under hot lights at a CNN town hall without breaking a sweat. She embodies sweat, sacrifice, and real-world grit. He embodies entitlement, privilege, and the kind of confidence only inherited wealth can buy.
Maybe is walking it back a tiny bit because his son is 9. I assume it's his son. Maybe it's his daughter. I'm actually not even sure. But he has a 9-year-old. Do you think he has any regret about all of the 5-year-olds that he enabled to be chemically castrated and all the other things that you mentioned before?
No, not at all, actually. First of all, notice he doesn't actually answer the question. Sean
Right.
Ryan asked very directly, outside of your role as governor, personally, with a child, is this something you can get behind? And he doesn't answer. He says, he puts it into his own personal experience. Look, I have a 9-year-old.
Riley didn't just roast his lifestyle, she dragged his policy straight into the pool. Take education. For example, California spends billions, yet results are at the bottom of the scoreboard, with kids unable to read at grade level, overcrowded classrooms, and underpaid teachers. Newsom talks about investing in the future, while Riley points out the obvious. The only thing growing in California schools is the number of students leaving for other states. Then there's the economy. California, supposedly the 5th largest economy in the world, sees small businesses fleeing like contestants on a bad dating show, suffocated by regulations, taxes, and red tape, sprinting to Texas faster than you can say no state income tax. Newsom frames it as progress. Riley frames it as entitlement, since he doesn't feel the pain cushioned by wealth. Crime barely gets a mention. San Francisco, his old stomping ground, looks like Gotham without Batman. With stores shutting down, people feeling unsafe, and theft turning into a tax-free shopping spree, Newsom responds with long speeches about compassion and reform, while Riley cuts through the nonsense, exposing that compassion doesn't mean letting chaos reign, and that his second crime approach is more about optics than fairness. And then there's the sports angle. Riley Gaines has become a national voice for fairness in women's sports, knowing firsthand what it's like to compete under rules that suddenly
issue men and women's sports, COVID, doesn't matter. But remember, actually, speaking of the issue of men and women's sports, when Charlie Kirk went on his podcast not long ago, a few weeks ago, he said the issue of boys and girls sports, again, that's been happening in his state to the nth degree. He says this is not just unfair, he says it's a deeply unfair issue.
Meanwhile, sits comfortably on the sidelines, virtue signaling policies that sound inclusive but actually undermine the very athletes who've worked their whole lives for a fair shot. And Riley called that entitlement out with the precision of a coach dissecting bad form. He doesn't understand the stakes because he's never had to earn a place in the arena. The way Riley went off wasn't just effective, it was entertaining. Cutting through political fluff with the blunt force of a starter's pistol. No careful wording. Just straight up calling the emperor out for strutting around with no clothes. And the public loved it, reacting like a standing ovation at a comedy roast finally. Someone saying what everyone was thinking. Gavin Newsom might look the part, but his leadership is about as authentic as a Hollywood Botox smile. Of course, defenders rushed in, trying to spin Riley as too harsh or out of line. But that only strengthened her point. When entitlement is exposed, it rarely looks pretty. Newsom, for all his charisma, couldn't hide from the reality Riley dragged into the spotlight. The fallout was classics. Holders hailed Riley as the voice of reason, brave enough to challenge a man who thinks California revolves around his reflection in the mirror, while critics scrambled, repeating talking points as if repetition could erase the truth. And the media couldn't get enough of the drama. It was reality TV with better lighting.
Reputational damage that's being done as they're sitting there on horses with American flags running through soccer fields, scaring kids that are playing soccer in the middle of the day at a summer camp. For what? Just toughness. It's a weakness masquerading as strength. That's what I don't like about this son of a I don't. And forgive me, I know he's the president of the United States. Forgive me, I didn't, yeah, he calls me new scum. Come on.
Story matters because it cracked the facade. Newsom has always operated like a politician whose image is bulletproof, but Riley Gaines proved it isn't, showing that no amount of designer suits, glossy speeches, or perfect hair can cover up entitlement when someone shines a light on it. Symbolically, Riley represents the people who grind, hustle, and claw their way toward success, while Newsom represents the privileged class floating above it all. When those worlds collided, the cracks in his image were impossible to ignore. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. California can keep pretending Gavin Newsom is the hero of his own story. But Riley exposed the plot twist. He's not the savior. He's the entitled villain coasting on charm and connections, and she did it with honesty no PR spin can erase. Politics isn't about the best hair or slickest speeches. It's about who's actually connected to reality. And reality hit Newsom like a cannonball splash when Riley went off. What really twists the knife is that Newsom doesn't even realize how much he embodies the stereotype Riley roasted. He actually thinks people buy the act, believing Californians see him standing in front of a crumbling cityscape and think, wow, this guy's got it under control. No, Gavin, they're thinking, why does this man look like he's auditioning for a toothpaste commercial while I can't walk 2 blocks without stepping over a tent?
He snuck in a lawsuit that he issued to the DOJ, to the Trump administration, and in this lawsuit he included a provision that was suing the DOJ for them trying to prevent the state of California for not allowing boys in girls' sports. All of that to say, I mean, we should look at this as what it is.
Riley's takedown worked because she didn't approach him with politician speak or drown her point in focus group uproot jargon. She grabbed the megaphone, called out the entitlement, and let the truth stand, and it did. When a college athlete points out that the emperor has no clothes, you might laugh it off once, but when the crowd starts nodding, suddenly the emperor's wardrobe department has a real problem. It's not just California noticing, the whole country has its eyes on Newsom, who's been auditioning for a national role since the day he figured out how to part his hair, parading around as the shiny alternative to the messier names in his party. But Riley throws a wrench into that Hollywood script. A swimmer refusing to let him coast on empty slogans, which is comedy gold. The hypocrisy angle is impossible to ignore. Newsom has mastered telling people to make sacrifices while never missing a luxury dinner reservation, famously dining at the state's priciest restaurants while small businesses folded like cheap lawn chairs during Riley didn't need fresh scandals, she simply reminded everyone that Gavin Newsom's middle name might as well be double standard.
Has actually sent out cease and desist to those who are willing to advocate against his participation in the women's category. First and foremost, it was not just California this happened in this past week. This happened in 5 states. Boys taking a girl's rightful spot as state champion, qualifying spots, podium spots in California, Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, and Maine. That is 5 states that have blatantly and defiantly ignored federal law, that federal law being Title IX, and of course, Donald Trump's most recent executive order.
Entitlement isn't just about lifestyle, it's a mindset. And Newsom carries himself like he's doing Californians a favor by being in charge, radiating the energy of a man who would charge a convenience fee just for making eye contact. Riley Gaines spotted it from a mile away and called it what it was: arrogance dressed up as leadership. Her timing couldn't have been better. Californians are exhausted, watching their state turn into a cautionary tale while the governor smiles and insists everything's fine, like being on the Titanic while the captain reassures you the water pouring in is just extra hydration. Riley yelled from the lifeboat, "Stop pretending you're saving the ship, you're steering it into the iceberg." People loved it because it wasn't political theater. It was relatable frustration. She spoke like a human, not a politician. Like a neighbor storming into the HOA meeting, saying, "Enough with mailbox colors. Can we fix the potholes?" That's why her words hit harder than any senator's speech. She wasn't defending a party, she was defending common sense. Newsom probably thought he could brush it off. But the internet doesn't let things like this go. Once Riley went viral, exposing his entitlement, memes exploded. Comparisons to reality TV villains appeared. His rules-4-you-not-4-me lifestyle was highlighted, and old clips suddenly looked worse under her spotlight. Overnight, he became a walking punchline.
Women in combat, more specifically women in the SEAL teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I'll say I am pretty fully on board with the approach that the current administration, specifically Pete Hegseth, has taken here. Again, there are very real differences between men and women. It's not to say that women are inferior. It's not to say that women aren't capable or strong, but we have our own physical ceilings. Like, there is a uniqueness to being a woman. And when we're talking about our nation's security, it's just not one of those things that I believe should be compromised.
And here's the kicker. This wasn't even Riley's job. She's not a professional political hitman, she's an athlete who decided she wouldn't stay quiet while politicians like Newsom treated her world like a prop. That's why it worked so well. When regular people see one of their own take a swing at someone untouchable, it doesn't just land, it echoes. It's David tossing the stone, except Riley used the truth instead of a slingshot. And the Goliath was a governor who mistakes camera flashes for applause. Newsom's entitlement may have survived critics, protests, and his own policy disasters, but it didn't survive Riley Gaines. She cracked the mask, and now everyone is peeking through the gap. Turns out the golden boy isn't so golden. Once you wipe off the polish, he's just another entitled politician who thought the shine would last forever.